This isn't green. Not this either. This isn't red. And this isn't blue. And today I'm going to tell you why. I'm sure if you've been on art YouTube enough, you may have seen people make these videos about knowing the difference between what colors we think we're seeing versus the actual colors we're using when digital painting, over and over again. And I'm sure you've also seen people telling you the opposite, that it's a silly trick with no actual use in painting, that this doesn't matter. Unless, if your main method of coloring is mainly using layer modes to layer on your colors, I can see why you might dismiss these observations as useless when learning art. If your blend mode is doing the calculations and color picking for you, how the actual resulting color on screen got there might not matter as much to you. I think keeping things simplified to not overwhelm yourself when learning art is a valid reason, because then you wouldn't be paralyzed by choice. There's so many tools in digital that can get you to the same outcome, so I understand why you might focus on one theory or tool at a time. But I would argue that knowing why this looks green, why this looks red, learning and understanding the actual screen colors to predict what colors you are using, being able to raw dog the colors can help you even if you mainly use layer modes. For example, knowing why this looks green lets you easily add more colors without changing the overall warm or cold tone of your painting. Knowing why this looks blue, you can add and color in little details without going through the whole layering process by instantly knowing what colors to choose from your color wheel and just painting it on top. And of course, you can transfer this knowledge if you decide to go traditional, since this theory transcends LED screens. I'm talking about color relativity, choosing and using colors based on how they look depending on the colors around it, rather than what the color actually is. This sounds complicated, but it can be simplified down to 2 sentences. That's how simple this concept is to use and memorize. This was introduced to me by Valencie's art, and she explains it very well, so I'll go into her explanation word by word, simplify that, and explain why this looks green and why this looks red with color relativity, and then use it in 2 paintings to show you 2 different ways you can actually use it in your paintings. Valencie says, if you are painting with a warm palette, the closer you get to gray is the closer you get to cold colors. On the flip side, if you're using a cold palette, the opposite is true. This is how I get dynamic colors while still maintaining the same warm or cool tone of the painting. Let's break it down. So in her first example, everything is warm toned, yellow, orange, red tinged. So this gray she added here in the shadow looks more blue because it is surrounded by that orange, that warmth. But in reality, it is a desaturated orange, even if it looks bluish. And here in this second example, because everything surrounding this gray is blue or cool toned, the gray she added looks more warm, even though technically she's just painting on a very desaturated blue. If you look at this hue saturation luminosity color model, HSL, it becomes a little bit easier to visualize. The warm side of the wheel and cold side are separated by gray. So if you take a warm color and move it toward the center, the colder the color becomes, and vice versa. So let's say you want to add the look of blue to a warm-toned palette, but pure blue is too bright. Instead of adding blue, decreasing the saturation of a warm orange and painting on that gray is enough to give the illusion of blue while keeping the overall warm tone. So this illusion is made because the surrounding colors affects how we think desaturated colors look. This can be boiled down to 2 sentences for you to remember. If the surrounding is warm, gray looks cold. If the surrounding is cold, gray looks warm. So why does this look green? If we blur it, it looks like gray surrounded by yellow, a warm color. As you desaturate yellow, it becomes colder, so we think it looks green. Why does this look red? If we blur it, it looks like a gray surrounded by cyan or blue, a cool color. As you desaturate blue, the color becomes warmer. And on top of that, our brains know the branding of a certain well-known multi-billion-dollar soda company who is simultaneously rich enough to run ads, but apparently not enough, so they use AI for ads instead of paying actual artists? What? So putting the 2 together, the illusion is stronger. In this painting, everything is desaturated, so her irises don't have a distinct color other than gray. But add some warm-toned colors with overlay to everything but the eyes, and suddenly her eyes look a little bluish-greenish. Why? It's a gray surrounded by orange. It all goes back to color relativity. But knowing theory versus how to actually use it in a painting are 2 different things. Let's start with what I think is the easiest way to use this theory, to add more colors when the overall tone and base colors are already established. How you add and select your base colors don't really matter, so here I'm starting with grayscale and then adding colors with gradient maps. After my base colors are done, there's a lot of details missing, so that means that I can paint those details in. The surrounding colors are already established, so to do this, I need to think of the color I want to add and what it might look like with those surrounding colors. This painting has a cool blue light and warm shadows, and I don't want to change the tone too much, so whenever I'm painting the shadows, I'm purposefully decreasing the saturation so that the shadows look warmer. I think a common color scheme to use whenever adding shadows is to add more saturation as you add the darker colors. But here, because the highlights and shadows are split between the cool and warm, you get to use gray as the intermediary color between the two. Instead of starting in the left corner of the color picker and moving to the right while adding your shadows, we're moving to the left to desaturate any blues, adding warmth to the shadow without actually adding any orange or red directly. But this is just adding colors after the base is done. What if you want to use color relativity from the beginning, in the base colors itself? For this next painting, I wanted everything to be warm except these flowers, so I needed a way to make this blue of the character's hair match the warm surrounding colors. While adding pure blue looks good if I wanted that bright, high contrast, if my aim is to keep that warm sunset vibe, adding pure blue won't work. If I just used blue, it would compete with the purple of the flowers, so knowing that we can give the appearance of a cool color by desaturating a warm color, I can just color pick a desaturated pink red and add it to my base colors from the very beginning into my gradient map to give the illusion of blue. It gives the appearance of blue, kinda, without disrupting the overall warm tone of the painting. I'm using gradient maps to add color, but even if you don't, you can still use the concept of strategically saturating and desaturating your colors, no matter how you color your paintings. Not gonna lie, at first it might be a little intimidating and it's a little bit trial and error to get used to it, but it does unlock a lot of color combinations and paintings you might not have thought of before. It allows you to add colors while maintaining your tone, warm or cold, whatever you're going for. Here they are, paintings using color relativity. Hopefully by now you know why this looks green or why this looks blue. I hope this helps, or is at least interesting to you. Okay, thanks for watching. See ya!